Unmuted. That's all right. Well, okay, so I think that we will get started. I printed out my initial business paperwork and then also some of the other, just more, the paperwork that I use the most of in my practice, and I wanted to just share what it is that I have and how I use that. Now, we also, just as a disclaimer, Maternity Wise does sell a pack, a suite of paperwork that these particular papers are in. And so if you have those and you want to look at them while I'm going through them, that's helpful, but it's not necessary. So you could just be taking notes and saying basically what it is, you know, that I'm saying about each thing, and then you can make your own. So I'm going to start and I'm going to go through these things kind of in the order in which I use them. So for example, have a client that calls and they are interested, or emails, and they're interested in participating in, you know, either care or a class or whatever it is. And basically, initially I make sure I get their email address if they've spoken to me on the phone. And if they've emailed me, obviously I reply back to them. And the first things that I talk to them about or ask them questions about is, and they usually tell me this up front, but if they haven't, I ask them, when are they due and where are they located? And or where are they giving birth? So when I lived in San Antonio, I basically went to every hospital that was in San Antonio. Even though San Antonio is huge, it didn't really matter if someone was, you know, at a hospital that was close to me or at a hospital across town. I went to all of them. Now here, I'm in New York City, and getting around is a lot more difficult. And so I like to ask, you know, where people are, where they're giving birth. You know, that kind of helps me to know. And then I also am limiting myself to 2 doula clients a month, for labor at least. So, so those are the things that I'm asking. So I want to know, when are they giving birth and where? Because that helps me to either qualify whether or not I can take them. And it also helps me to know what I can offer them. So for example, I typically use, and you can do it however way you want to do it, but I typically use a 2 or a 4 prenatal visit plan with people. So I'm showing you guys my 4 prenatal plan. But if I have, so for example, I just recently had someone contact me, they're due August 5th. I'm not going to have time. I'm not going to be able to see them unless they really, really, really want it. I'm not going to be able to even offer them the 4 prenatal plan, because I won't be able to see them 4 times before their due date. And I don't want to push it to their due date just in case they go early and then they miss out on some important information that I might have given them if I had seen them. So for those people, I offered the 2 prenatal plan. So I have like a 4 prenatal and a 2 prenatal, and then I also offer classes that I provide for them in their homes. And that can be before or after, just depending on what the topic is. But the 4 prenatal plan, basically my first prenatal, I go over nutrition stuff and exercise stuff, and we talk about the tests that they have coming up. So for example, if they're before their gestational diabetes test, I would talk to them about that. I would talk to them about how they can make sure that they pass that test. If they're later in their pregnancy, obviously I would talk to them about their group B strep test and fluid levels test, so they would understand about those things. During their second prenatal, I go over the mechanics, the actual mechanics of birth. So I sit down with them and I pull out this pelvis that I have in my bag, and everybody laughs, and we go over like, okay, with a baby coming down through this pelvis, what does that look like? What are the mechanics? What are the things that are involved? And I talk a lot about dads in that prenatal as well. During third prenatal, I go over the politics of their location. So if they're having a birth at home, there's a lot less politics involved, right? So the protocols and everything I would discuss with them include what home birth midwifery rules and laws include. Now, And obviously hospital, same. And then we also talk about a birth wish list, and we start to create that. At their 4th prenatal, we really are wrapping things up and packing for the hospital. That's always a big question that moms have. And talking about how we can make the labor room feel homey to them when we get there. Like, how can we nest once we get to the hospital? So those are my 4 prenatal series, and I typically spend an hour and a half to 2 hours with each family. And then also on this little explanation of the prenatals, I include a little bit more about my philosophy and what they can expect at each prenatal. Now, when the reason why I went through this with you real quick is that when the person contacts me, if they want my, if it's appropriate for me to send them the 2 prenatal series, then I send them the paperwork that says that, which is a little abbreviated version of this, or I send them the 4 prenatal series so that they know what it is they're going to be receiving, what they're paying for. The second thing I send them in that email is my list of care duties. This is more postpartum, but I send it to them anyway. One reason is they may not have thought of a lot of these things that they're going to need afterward, and so it might be really useful for them to think, I might hire her for doing a little bit of care afterwards. So that's a little of an upsell as far as a business tactic goes. But it also, I encourage them to keep in mind that these are things that they're going to need afterward. And so if they're not hiring me or someone else, then they need to at least be prepared. So I'm doing, again, like a little bit of education, even in my initial contact information. I'm trying to educate people. Because even if they don't choose to hire me, at least they have gotten this information in front of them, and they know, maybe they hadn't thought about something yet, and this triggers an idea that they need to look into some more of their options or planning, etc. So on this list of care duties, I've got it categorized, but it's feeding your baby, baby's body care, comforting the baby, interacting with baby, getting rest for mom and baby. And then on the other side, it's assisting mother, home care, assembly and setup of different things like the breast pump, and then feeding your family. And so, for example, some of the things in these categories, let's say baby's body care, help with baby's first and future baths, help with trimming and filing baby's nails, teach cord and circumcision or non-circumcision care. So those are some things. So this is laying out kind of as their doula what kind of stuff I can help them with. And some of it is, good for them as far as planning ahead of time. And we can even do some of it ahead of time. So like the assembly and setup of like baby monitors or breast pumps, I can do that before the baby comes. I can help them with that at a prenatal if that's something that they want. So along with those 2 things, my prenatal series telling them what they're going to get, the list of care duties telling them what else they can get, I also include what I call my menu of services. And my menu of services is also categorical, and it's according to package. So I don't like to, I know some doulas out there will do like, I meet with you once, if you want more, you pay more per prenatal, that sort of thing. I mean, I can obviously allow for more, but my minimum that I want to meet with a family is twice, and that does not include their intake visit. So if I visit with them either on the phone or in person to do kind of their intake and like figure out kind of what they are needing and where they're at in their pregnancy and what questions they have, I'm still getting to know them, they're still getting to know me, but I don't charge for that. So my different packages are, the labor comprehensive package. So I explained to them that includes, prenatal coaching, planning for the birth, written wish list, and then on-call labor, self-explanatory, classes. So the big comprehensive package includes classes, childbirth class, newborn class, breastfeeding class. And then you've got your obviously your in-hospital and in-home lactation support, which not everybody here is going to be offering that, but those of you that are, that's something important to remember that you can add to your packages and not have simply as something separate. And then I also do a postnatal session, which includes, talking about their birth and helping them to process their birth, but then also giving referrals and resources. And I do sleep consultations. I have worked with so many families that want some kind of sleep help, but I also don't want them to hire just the average sleep trainer because they're not necessarily breastfeeding savvy, and they're not necessarily baby, mommy, bond, and attachment savvy. And so a lot of sleep training programs out there are not really baby friendly and mom friendly. So I also offer a sleep consultation that is along the same lines as, my philosophy with birth and everything else. And that is preserving breastfeeding, having realistic expectations for sleep, that sort of stuff. So I do offer that with the big package. My smaller package has 2 prenatal sessions, like I mentioned, on-call labor support, and 1 in-home session. They can always ask me back, and I will always happily come back for breastfeeding help, but that's what the small package is for. Then I also have lactation support here. And then my postpartum packages and fees. And so if you're doing postpartum, you're going to want to create a few different levels as far as your payment goes. So you'll want a daytime hourly postpartum rate, and spell that out with your minimum. So like for me, I have a 4-hour minimum. If I come to you, I want to be there for at least 4 hours. Otherwise, the travel doesn't really justify itself, especially like, for example, I have a client who's in Jersey City, and it takes me about an hour and a half to get to them. I will never take another client in Jersey City, by the way, because it is so far. But so for that, it would be 3 hours of travel time. I really need to be at their house 4 to 5 hours in order to make it even worth it. I can listen to podcasts on my way, but still it's 3 hours of time when I'm traveling on the subway, which is fine, but anyway. And then your overnight shift. I would not recommend breaking up your overnight shift into hourly pieces. I would say give yourself an overnight shift of 8 hours, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then you can add on hours after that. And you don't have to have it 10 to 6. I've had military families who have me there from, what did they have me? From 8 to 4, one family. Another family had me from, 9 to 5. So you just, whatever your family is wanting, but just break it into an 8-hour shift. And then price it that way. So you're giving them a little bit of a break. But you will find too that a lot of your families will ask for an extra hour on one end or the other, and you just tag on an hourly rate hour to that package. So they're getting their overnight shift plus 1 hour. And then if you want, you can have packages where you're like offering, 10 nights and they get $100 off or something. So keep that in mind, that you can play with it that way. But I spell it out. I just say this is my minimum and this is the overnight shift minimum, like what that means. And then I've got the sleep consultant services, parent coaching services, and I offer that virtually as well as in person. So that's something that you might want to consider is doing, even if it's like birth coach services virtually, not necessarily when they're in labor, that might not work so well, but prenatally, when you're doing help with people. I had one client who they came from Israel and flew into San Francisco. And I went to San Francisco and I was with them for a month. And I was there a week before the baby came, and then I was able to be there for 3 weeks after. And it worked out to do it that way. But we had several just prenatal visits like by Skype beforehand. So that may work for some of you that maybe travel or have clients who are abroad and coming back or whatever. And then I also do a postpartum blessing way, which we can get into another time. But when I'm contacted initially, I send them these things so that they have as many of their main questions answered as possible. That saves me time. So I'm not on the phone answering the same question with every single inquiry, because that's just a time waster, right? You just want to systemize stuff so that you've got things in a format that is very simple, very easy to read. And then the other thing is you may feel like you want to, be flexible with your pricing and stuff. At least give them this, and then you could tell them separately, like, hey, I also have a military discount, or hey, I do, for families whose husbands or family members deployed, I do free doula care, or however you want to, work it. But I would say the smartest way to at least handle inquiries is going to be give them all the information up front. And the people that don't want to hire you because you're outpricing or whatever, you don't have to sit there and waste time trying to convince them, right? Because they've had the information. If they say no thanks, then it's no thanks. But the other thing is that when you hand them this information in an email and it's easy for them to read, print out, share with their spouse, it sets you apart. You're not just some flaky person that they're going to meet at Starbucks later, and they don't really know a lot about your care, and they don't really know a lot about your pricing. It's all up front. It's all just very clear. And that starts the process of trust right off the bat. So that's my first recommendation. And how I handle inquiries is systemize. If it's organized and clear, I've already set myself above and beyond most of the other doulas that they've probably already contacted. Now, when I go to their home, and I'm now, okay, they've seen my paperwork, they're interested in hiring me. When I go to their home, I don't plan to interview when I'm there. I've already interviewed with them. That information is my resume, essentially, and I've spoken to them on the phone, and they like me. So when I'm going to their home, I'm expecting to do an intake. I don't like to use the term interview, and I don't really like to use the term free consultation, because it gives the idea that I'm just here and my time's not worth anything, and I'll just come and visit with you, and that's that, and no big deal. When in reality, if I'm coming to you, it's because you're going to be my client, right? So when you are first showing up, you can have the paperwork that I bring with me. I put it in a 3-ring binder, and I'm going to go through all this, but the first thing I do is I sit down and I make it conversational, but I'm asking them some questions. So I've got my client intake form, right? And with the intake form, I'm asking them their basics: name, due date, relationship, partner, phone, all those things. Who their caregiver is, who their baby's caregiver is. They probably haven't thought about that yet. Where they're giving birth, if they've been through classes. Is this a pregnancy that's a single or a twin, or do they know the gender? Are they planning to breastfeed? There's a lot of different things that, yes, I can mark these down, but I'd really rather have a conversation about it. So I ask them these questions a little bit in more of a conversational tone, so that we can also be developing rapport while I'm getting their information. When they're in their doctor's office, when they're in their midwife's office, when they go to the hospital, they're going to have somebody who's not actually interested in their answers except to put them down on paper, right? But I'm interested in their answers, and I want them to feel that difference. So I use this as a conversation piece to get to know them better. And it's also for my record keeping. So that is in my file that I take home with me after my meeting. But the other things that are in that folder that I give them are the 4 prenatals, so they know what to expect at our future visits. So even though I've emailed that to them, I've also printed it out and put it in a folder for them that stays with them. The next thing that's in that folder is a sample birth plan. And I explained to them that, and this is also in that suite that I was telling you guys about, I explained to them that this is, it's categorical, and I don't expect them to, use exactly these suggestions, but these are suggestions on what to cover on their birth plan. So things like labor, pushing, immediate postpartum, newborn care, and then I call it special circumstances. And special circumstances really is just if I have a cesarean, or if my baby passes, or something else that's unexpected. The wording that they use is going to be very team-oriented, very much like, these are my goals, please help me meet my goals, rather than I'm going to allow you to do this, and I'm not going to allow you to do that. The other thing I tell them about their birth plan is, you know, take your, sorry, I'm just going to mute everybody. Take your categories and decide on maybe 3 to 4 of the most important things in each category. So for labor, maybe their pain med preference, maybe their positions to labor in, maybe something about a medical intervention that they want or don't want, like Pitocin or water breaking. And then just state your preference. This is not a paper where you're going to list your defense, right? You're not going to say, oh, I want this or I don't want that, and this is why. You're just going to say something like, please don't offer me pain meds. I'll ask for it if I want it. Done. Easy. So that sort of thing, and that's their sample. And we will, in my prenatals, I will go over this with them later, but they have this in their hand, and that's helpful to them. The next thing I also go over is a customized care plan. And this is a little bit more for the postpartum clients that I have than it is for labor, but it does help with labor in that it helps them think ahead to just what to expect postpartum. So I've got things like the 3 most important goals that you want our care to meet. Will you be recovering from a cesarean? Do you or your baby have any special needs, any food allergies, that sort of stuff? And that can help me as their labor doula coach, but it also helps, you know, if I'm going to do postpartum, for me to know a little bit more about them. So I fill this out for them, and then this stays in their folder. And the other thing that this is beneficial for is, let's say you are doing postpartum, but let's say you miss a day. You're sick, or your car breaks down, or your kids are sick, and you have to send a backup. Your backup has the information right there in their folder when they get there. Another thing that I have in their folder is like a care log, postpartum care log, and there's several pages in there. And I fill that out when I'm there. I fill it out pretty detailed. What I'm doing, what time, you know, baby fed on the right side, burped well, you know, large BM, no BM, whatever, diaper change. So I fill those out, and so there's a record, there's a log, and I take a picture with my phone before I leave of each page that I filled out, so that I have a record of it as well, and then it stays in their home so that they have a record of it, which is helpful because let's say that baby's not doing so well. Maybe baby's not feeding so well, or gaining weight or whatever. They've got a record of, this is how baby's been eating for the last few days. It doesn't look good. Maybe we need to talk to our pediatrician about it. And then when they bring their notes in to their pediatrician, pediatricians love documentation. So that's really helpful, and it makes you, again, stand out from the crowd because your name, your business name, is on the top of your postpartum care log. So then they know these people are professionals and they're good to trust my clients with or their patients with, and so they are more likely to then refer to you in the future. So that's just a little side note. So customized care plan. Another thing that is in my folder when I come and meet with them for the first time is the contract. So the contract that we have in that suite is, obviously it's just a sample. I've included mine and I've used it for years, and I've had several lawyers look it over just to make sure that it's all good. But when you're writing a contract, yes, you want it to say the same sort of stuff. It needs to reflect you and your practice and your packages, but I want you to go to a lawyer, spend the $100, get it checked out, make sure it's all good. But you want your contract to also say, you know, what you need it to say in order to protect you legally in your state. So that's the other thing, is there's different laws in different states, and you want to make sure that you are protected in your own state. So that, again, is in that suite, but you can also find contracts online. So I think that's how I initially started when I revamped my contract, because my original contract was like, I'm your doula, you're my client, you pay me this, I promise to be at your birth, the end, sign. You know, it wasn't complicated. But then I had a neighbor of mine who was also a doula client of mine tell me, you should really include a liability clause in there and some other information. So it's all in there now. Okay. One more thing that I don't include in that initial paperwork that I have when I'm at their house, but I do forward to them later, is a contract plan. So let's say that they have asked for the big package and they want classes. Well, I'm going to write down, you know, we do a prenatal visit 1 plus childbirth prep class 1, and here are the date options, and hopefully they get back to me on what their dates are, and I either circle it or I just write it in and print it off that way. But I keep this in their file. So I have one copy of their contract, and I have their intake form. And these are the things that stay in my file, as well as a copy of their payment, whatever kind of payment they did, whether it's a check or if I sent them an invoice by QuickBooks or Square or whatever. So I keep a file with their intake form. When I'm at their house, when I go to my meeting, my intake meeting, remember when I'm planning on walking away with a contract, I bring actually 2 copies of the contract. I don't want to ever expect that a family will have a copier machine that they can provide me with a copy. I just think that's a little rude. So I just come with 2 copies. And then I fill them out the exact same. And also at the bottom, I've got, you know, special packages and circumstances, that sort of thing. I write down there how they paid, like how we're breaking it down. One of the ways that I do it is 50% at the intake appointment, 50% by week 36. All right, and I write that in here. I say, you know, like it says it right up here, but I also write down here, paid by check number, blah, 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 this amount on date, this amount, or this date. And I write that right in the bottom here, and then I initial it. And they initial it too, showing that we all agree they've made one payment and this is what it is. Okay, and then one of those contracts stays with them, fully filled out, and one of those contracts comes home with me, fully filled out, and goes into my file. And then I email them this when we've agreed on the dates and everything else, and this customized contract plan also goes into my file. The next thing that I want to talk to you about is if you're doing lactation. I'm not going to go real deep into this because not everybody's doing lactation, but this is very helpful for those of you that are. My lactation consultation intake form is pretty thorough. There's 5 pages to it, I believe. And I go over, you know, the reasons for needing a consultation. I go over what have they tried so far. Have they seen a midwife, a doctor, another lactation consultant? Like who's also giving them advice? What's their personal history? Do they have any allergies, cancer, anything? You know, just their medical history as much as I can possibly take it. We talk about cycles because obviously hormones have some part to play in your milk supply. We talk about how they got pregnant, if it was IVF, if it was natural, if these are twins. And then we talk about the birth experience because trauma can play into breastfeeding issues. And then we talk about breastfeeding history. We talk about previous breastfeeding if there is any, and then this particular baby. We talk about, you know, whether or not they've attended any kind of support group. And if they haven't, I make sure that I give them some options that are local to them. And we talk about baby's story. That's important. We talk about what's baby's story. Did the baby spend time in the NICU? Has the baby had time away from mom for some reason? What are the baby's current feeding patterns? And then we talk about other info like the baby's weight at birth, the baby's current weight. And then we can do like a weigh, feed, weigh type thing where we weigh the baby, mom feeds the baby, then we weigh the baby afterward. And this is not it's not an official medical diagnosis of how much the baby's taking on, but it does give mom an idea if the baby's transferring well or not. And it also gives us an idea, do we need to refer out? Does she need more help than what we can offer? And so we keep account of that, and hopefully we've seen mom a couple of times and done that a couple of times with her so that she can feel like she's, doing well. I also have a release, consent, and contract for lactation support. Again, this is going to cover, you'll want it to cover money, you'll want it to cover liability, you'll want it to cover the fact that your advice is not considered medical advice, and that you will refer her to a primary caregiver, but you're also taking down information so that she can know what questions to ask her primary caregiver if she needs to go to one. And then, just liability waiver and that sort of thing. And a contract saying she agrees and she understands, right? Another thing in that suite that I feel is really important and that I use a lot with my clients is an insurance reimbursement process explanation. So this talks about, like, what do they need to do as the client to get reimbursement from their insurance company for my services. Now, it's not guaranteed, right? But if you're certified and you can provide her with a form, voila, with all the information that she needs on it, like all the right codes and everything else, then more likely she will get your services reimbursed to some degree, even if it's just for out-of-network, after deductible reimbursement, which could be 20/80. At least she can get something, right? And the thing is that insurance companies, the more they see doula claims, the better it is for doulas and for clients. So this explains to her that she needs to provide, all her identification details that need to go onto this sheet. So like her birth date, her social security number, baby's birth date, her mailing address, her ID card. You need a picture of her ID card front and back so you can see like the numbers, the address to send the claim to, everything. And then it gives her instructions on what to do, printing out, her, she needs to write a letter saying why she feels like it saved the insurance company money, because that's what they want to hear, for her to have used a doula, and why she feels that it was beneficial to her outcome, and why she thinks that they should reimburse, right? So things like that. These are all really important instructions. And then also, obviously, you want a form that includes all the information that her insurance company wants to have in order to process that claim. And the last two things I wanted to share with you guys is just a couple of promotional pieces. Now, there's a lot more in that suite that I keep talking about. If you want to see the list of the document titles, you don't have to buy it, but you can go on there and you can see the list of all the document titles so that you can kind of think to yourself, okay, what do I need for my own practice? But one of the things that I use for promo is this thing, and it's called All About Our Unique Doulas. And I send this to doctors. I send this to, if we're going to be interviewed on the news, whatever, I send this. So this talks a little bit more about it, like what our certifications are, ongoing continuing education, how many hours of workshops and independent study it's required. I talk about the kind of specialized training that we've had. And then I also talk about the fact that we have a professional level of care, like we wear uniforms and we use, record keeping, and we have a whole referrals network and that sort of thing. And then I list the education that we provide, so the classes that we provide, and then how does that physician's practice actually benefit from using our care. So for example, we're the hands and feet and the eyes and ears in the home that the pediatricians can't be. We're reducing anxiety of clients, which reduces phone calls to their office, things like that. So these are all the things that are listed here, the benefits, and the reasons why we're unique and why we're professional. And that makes a difference when you're trying to sell your services, to set yourself apart. And, there are a lot of amazing doulas out there that run a much more relaxed business. But if you want this to be a business and you want this to be your career, it's very important for you to really take it seriously and make sure that the paperwork you're using is representing you in that way, in a professional way. Now, lastly, I've been on TV several times. I've been on the radio several times. And it's not only because I've sought out opportunities, sometimes they come to me, but you can seek out opportunities. So you can actually create like a show in a box for a producer. And let me tell you, producers are they're hungry for ideas all the time. So this is just kind of a layout of what they would want to know in order to maybe create a show around what you're offering. So you would tell them what the main focus of the segment would be. You would list 3 or 4 talking points, and you would give them some suggestions for questions to ask. And then you would tell them about maybe an upcoming event, like an upcoming class or a meet and greet for doulas or something else that you're involved in. And obviously make sure that they have your website address, and then provide them with maybe some photos or even videos of you in action. That would make a producer's day if you basically handed them, here is the show in a box. Here's all the information you need. Now tell me what date to be there and you can interview me, and voila, here I am. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you guys that are kind of my most used business documents. I hope that helps you to figure out what you need and how to use paperwork in your business. Did you have any questions? Because I think we have just a couple minutes left.
Anne, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan. Thank you.
One question that came up as I was listening, and I may have missed it, but did you talk about how your documents like coordinate in terms of HIPAA laws and how HIPAA laws might govern doula care?
That is a really good question. So we aren't technically medical providers, so we aren't technically under the HIPAA laws. However, you do want to make sure that you're protecting your client's privacy. And so one of the things that I do, I have a locked file cabinet, which is where I keep my clients' files. The other thing I do is I make sure that my phone, just to protect my client's privacy, if they're texting me, nothing shows up on my phone. It doesn't even show their name always. So my phone has to be unlocked in order for me to see who's texting what. So that's another thing. And then obviously when I'm taking pictures of my paperwork, if I have to take pictures, that also, because my phone is locked, is secure on my phone. But when you're going through like your intake information and anything that would have private information on it, I really strongly recommend that, as you're traveling to and from, that you have a zippered bag so it's at least secure in that way. And then once you are home or to your office, that you have a secure location to store those files. Anything that's in the person's home doesn't have to be secure necessarily. So the binder that they have at their house that we're keeping notes in doesn't have to be kept under lock and key because it's in their home, it's their information. But anytime you take their information out of their home or away from wherever they are or you're caring for them, yes, I would be very careful with it. The other thing that I make sure of when I'm, let's say I'm going into a hospital, but I know it's kind of a sketchy hospital and I don't really want to, it's not like your bags or anything are going to be in a place that they would not be supervised, because you're going to be in the same room as your bag at all times. But just for safekeeping, I don't typically bring my paperwork with me to the hospital when I'm going to a birth. It's what I need to know is on my phone. And that's her address, and everything else I've got in my mind. And then the only other thing that would be maybe sharing their information would be their birth plan. But I ask them to make copies of it, and they provide it to their caregivers. And I tell them, make an extra copy for me because, I'm there too, and just in case we need an extra for a nurse or something, they can use mine. And that's kind of how I work that. But you're right, you do have to be careful with your documentation, that you're not vulnerable to kind of, exposing their information anywhere.
Okay. And I guess related to that, do you, in your contract with them or a separate document, do you get a release of information, or is that only if you're going to share it with another professional?
Exactly. So that's one of the things that's on the lactation is, I have a consent to share information.
Okay.
That's part of my lactation thing. And I also have another form that I sometimes use for high-risk moms, and it's a lactation high-risk assessment form. And on that form, they sign, you know, it's okay for me to share this with whoever. But the thing that how I use that form is that I give it to the mom. So then she takes it with her to the baby cafe or to her pediatrician or whatever. So she is providing her information to the caregiver, but it's what I've written down for her. So it's like the weigh, feed, weigh, document, like notes and other maybe things that I've assessed, such as, you know, nipple damage or tongue tie suspicion, you know, because we can't say, you know, baby has a tongue tie, but we can say it looks like a tongue tie.
Right.
You know, please check for a tongue tie that, you know, like it appears to be a tongue tie of this degree, you know, but so you have to be careful how you word things.
Okay.
But yeah, so she's providing that information to her caregiver, and that's how that gets shared. That's a great question.
Yeah, I guess in terms of like birth doula or postpartum doula roles, the maybe consent to share would be in terms of if I need a backup. And I'm sure in that situation, they would be happy to have me share their information so the backup doula is more informed.
So the way that I've gotten around that in the past is if you work independently, you would want to also have, you know, the backups information on there. And on my contract, I actually have a spot for the backup to sign. So they realize that the backup, and as much as I'm able, I bring my backup with me when I do their initial intake. So they get to meet both people that could potentially be at their birth. And then because I also run agencies. So when I've run an agency, it's the agency name on the contract.
I see.
So basically, and I don't explicitly say any doula within this agency could see your materials, but I say your primary and your backup doula, and that's in the wording of the contract.
I see.
So then they understand that, you know, that their information would be shared with those two people and the owner because it's the business.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions, guys? All right, well, that about wraps it up. We're at 45 minutes anyway, so thanks for coming and thanks for sharing with me. If you have any other questions, please let me know, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.